you are. And I trust that the Lord has been keeping you well. And I think as Pastor Ramjin has already introduced the subject for tonight, the idea really just I think it came from the previous questions that were being asked about how to buy properties from auctions and how to invest and buy land and what are auctions. And those are the things that we're going to be looking at this evening. So if you could just follow me as we through this presentation. I'll try and be as quick as I can because there is quite a lot to share. But I think Pastor, you'll be happy that if we can give maybe perhaps half an hour or so, even if not more, for people to ask questions. Because I think the last time with Craig, the last couple of times we ran out of time when people wanted to ask some questions because we had a lot of questions. So I will start. But to anybody who may need this presentation, just for their own information, by all means, at the end of the presentation, there's not a click or like or share, but if you could just if you just take the details of my PA, that's Lisette Ngube, her details are at the end of the presentation, and she'd be more than happy to assist you. So what are the aims of this presentation tonight? So we hope to talk about buying from an auction. We want to look at the types of auctions. We want to also look at managing an auction property, or mortgaging an auction property, should I say, buying land. And the question that was asked from the previous presentation that we did was, can you mortgage an auction property? Generally, you are able to get a mortgage agreement on a property that you buy at an auction. But the most important thing that I would encourage anybody who may consider to get a property or buy a property from an auction is to always meet a criteria or to have a lending agreed in principle. So there is a criteria that you must meet before being able to do so. And again, this criteria, not all auction properties are eligible to mortgage finance because it all depends whether it's an unconditional sale or a conditional sale. So I'll get on to explain what conditional sales are and unconditional sales are as well. So the property must meet certain standards in order to be accepted. And the standards that we spoke about from the previous presentation, as you probably would recall, we spoke about that the property has to be in a livable condition. So that's one of the most key important features or conditions for any lender to lend anybody any money or who's wishing to get a mortgage to buy a property or acquisition a property. The property has to have a living standard. That's one of the most important conditions. So how is it different to purchasing a property traditionally? Now, full cost of the property sold at auction must be paid within a particular timescale. Majority of the property auction sales, you have 28 days. Now, some vendors tend to put their own conditions, maybe give you 21 days to complete, give you 14 days to complete. So it's always important to read the small print before exchanging any contracts, because once the gavel falls, and you have an obligation of ensuring that you meet that expectation. So this is determined by whether the lot, and what we mean by a lot, the lot is the property is auctioned an unconditional or on a conditional basis. Ensure that you can obtain the full amount of finance before this period comes to an end. And this is always good practice because you don't want to win the bid and then you find yourself in a situation where your lender is not in a position to offer you the full amount that you have, or maybe perhaps the full value of the property or the loan to value of what you're purchasing. So that may probably put you in a very difficult situation. So as soon as the hammer falls, you are in legally binding contract to purchase that property under the terms set out. So what are unconditional sales? Now, it's important to note that if you're the highest bidder on that day of sale, you must pay the full 10% deposit immediately after the hammer falls on a lot. Say, for example, if the property is worth 100,000, so you must have readily available as cleared funds via your card. Back in the days, they used to check checks, but I'm not really sure whether so many auctions have tried to run away from taking checks. So it tends to be either a bank transfer or a debit card, or paying from your credit card, which probably would incur you costs, but it has to be done on that day. Now, secure and pay the rest of the funds within 28 days, unless otherwise stated in your legal pack. So it's always important to read the legal pack. And if there are certain terms and certain legal or property jargon or land law jargon that is used, always seek clarification from your legal advisor. Failure to pay within timescales could result you losing your deposit. So I need to share this with you, my brothers and sisters, is that I have been there before, where I have actually lost deposits before, because my mortgage lenders at the time, and which was part of my learning curve, that they were not able to complete within the timescales that had actually been agreed on the legal pack. And I found myself in a situation whereby the vendor was able to enforce their rights, and I actually lost the deposits. So you may be liable to pay the full amount. And the example in case, some many years ago, I bought a piece of land. It was a pocket of land in Eddington, in Birmingham. And when I bought it for about 26,000. And when I bought it for 26,000, when I went to do what we call a pre-planning application, just to see if I was able to get some planning application to build a property on the land, I was told that no, the land did not have any planning permission granted in the past and will not be getting one. So I tried to come out of the deal, but unfortunately I found myself having to pay the full 26,000 to the person that was selling the property, and I lost the whole amount. So you will be expected to foot the cost for the resale of the property at a forthcoming auction. That is, if you do not complete. So it is always very important to be very, very fully aware that if you do not complete in any auction sale, you may be liable to pay the full amount. You may be liable also as well to pay the resale costs. So these are for listing with the future auction or any auction that they decide to. And also if they've incurred any losses on listing the property that you have not completed on, they may call for the cost from yourself. So what are conditional auctions? So this tends to be better options when it comes to securing mortgage finance. Completion timescales tend to be longer than unconditional auction sales. You have 28-day exclusivity period. That gives you the time to sort out any due diligence without the fear of another buyer swooping in and making a higher offer. So after this period, you have 28 days to complete the sale, which is similar to the terms of the traditional auction. Conditional auction. Again, you have a better chance of being successful as a buyer purchasing a property in order to both own or occupy it. And it gives you more time. So you can secure your mortgage. You can have a surveys done. So whoever is your lender, you've got ample time to send your surveyors to go and actually survey the property and actually tell you what the property is actually worth. You can engage with the solicitors. You can acquire buildings insurance if your mortgage lender would require that as a condition before they lend you any money. You can complete any administration work required. So it is very important that we understand that different auction floors work on those kind of levels, whether be it a conditional and an unconditional. But what I always encourage anybody is to go for a conditional, because it does give you more option opportunities. So how can I secure a mortgage? How can I secure a mortgage before heading to the auction? That is very important. It is very important that one secures a mortgage in principle. Basically, what a mortgage in principle certificate looks like is what's actually reflected on the screen. So this in principle shows whoever you're buying the property from that you have a lender who's willing to borrow you that type of amount. So it is important that you secure a mortgage principle before you attend the auction. The auction, if you are not a cash buyer and you require a mortgage to purchase a property. So what is a mortgage in principle? And I think we have discussed that before, that a mortgage in principle means that the lender states that they are willing to lend you a certain amount of money in principle. And to get the mortgage in principle, one will need to provide your bank society or your building society your proof of income. So can you give a clear idea of, it can give you a clear idea, beg your pardon, of how much you can potentially afford to pay. It can act as proof of affordability at the auction, and also give the vendors or whoever that you've won the bid from that you'll be able to complete. So the lender can back out at any time after supplying you with the mortgage in principle. So it is very important to be very fully aware that a mortgage in principle is not necessarily a surety that you will be able to have everything completed, because a lender can back out in any given situation. This is assuming that maybe there's certain disgruntled or things that have not been met. So highly recommended is having a mortgage valuation carried out. So usually when you buy a property from an auction, within the 28 days, the lender will be able to ask you or refer a surveyor to have a valuation carried out for you in order to ascertain whether the property is what it is. So remember that a mortgage lender will only lend you the agreed amount based on the price at which the property has been valued at. If the bid goes over the auction estimate, you will be expected to pay the difference. This may also compromise your mortgage application. So it's very important to try and stick within or buy something that's a bit less than maybe perhaps what would have been agreed or granted you in principle. So plan a realistic budget and keep it to it if considering buying a property that will partly be financed with a mortgage. So have a survey carried out on the property beforehand. This is to ensure you know exactly what you are signing up for before you purchase. So it's important that when planning your budget, be sure to factor all added extras, such as valuation fees, such as surveys, such as legal advice, deposits, anything else outlined in the property legal pack, and conditions of sale such as searches generally included in legal pack. So check these thoroughly before you bid. So what happens then if the lender cannot meet the completion deadline? So if you do not have the funds available immediately or worried about securing them in a 28 period or turnaround, opt for bidding on a property that is being conditionally auctioned. Mortgage takes, usually a mortgage takes about 18 to 40 days to be arranged. In some cases, this can take longer, but there are other financing options available while you wait. These could include bridge loans. What I always say to people is that, yeah, I'm not encouraging anybody to go for loans, but if it's a way of wedging your foot on the door with the view that it's easy actually to turn a bridging loan into a mortgage at the end of its term. But the catch there always lies on the interest rate. So always be very careful as to checking what sort of interest rates any lender gives you. So a bridging loan can help you in the interim to pay the cost and can be obtained much quicker than a mortgage. And usually the turnaround for that is usually 10 days. So this is providing you've got the deposit and you've got maybe if it's 25% and the loan to value is probably 75% from the lender, just always ensure you have the deposit available. So this provides a short-term solution to buy a property. I always call it wedging your foot on the door. So important to note that a bridging loan has a significantly higher interest, as I've already mentioned. So be mindful of that. So what type of properties am I unable to purchase as a mortgage buyer? So not all properties can be purchased from an auction using a mortgage. There are some properties who, when you approach your lender as a buyer, they may very well say that no, they're not willing and they're not in a position to fund that. So the condition of the property is one of the biggest factors a mortgage lender will always look into or consider before agreeing any finance options with you. So typically only provide you with a mortgage agreement if the property purchased is in a livable condition and immediately habitable or lettable. That is one of the most important conditions. Steer clear of properties that are in a state of repair. And usually as a first-time buyer, or if you're thinking of buying a property for investment, what I will always urge anybody is try and stay clear away from properties that may need any refurbishing until you gain the experience that you need. Because yes, there are a lot of hidden things on properties that may need to be repaired, and you may find yourself in a massive a kerfuffle when it comes to property repair costs and bills when you unearth issues on properties or on the building that may very well need to be looked after. So without stating the obvious, you will not be able to purchase an unmortgageable property at an auction if you wish to secure a mortgage finance. So a property can be rendered unmortgageable for many reasons. For example, a property that has a short hold lease. I think we spoke about leases. If you remember from the previous presentation, we described what a lease was, which is basically it's a time within a tenure. So a tenure is just a time period you have on a property. We spoke about the advantages of a leasehold over a freehold, as you would recall. And again, if you do have any questions, by all means, get the email address at the end of the presentation and send your questions to Liseti, and she'll be able to respond to you. So properties with no kitchen, you probably will not be able to get a mortgage with that. If the kitchen is not in a good state of repair, and again, properties with no bathroom, properties deemed too small. So you will also be unable to purchase a property that has non-standard structure such as concrete. A property that has Japanese knotweed. Here is just an example of a picture with a Japanese knotweed, or a property that suffers some kind of defect like dry or wet rot will not be available to have a mortgage. So can I buy a property to renovate and finance with a mortgage? Typically, a lender will not agree to give you a mortgage if you wish to purchase a property that is particularly in bad condition. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if the property is in a good condition and like physically the structure, the traces, the foundation is in good condition and the walls are in a good state of repair, you may possibly get some form of lending. So if you wish to purchase a big renovation project, you may need to consider other options such as commercial loans instead, or bridge loans as we spoke earlier, but they always come with high interest options and rates. So once you have improved the condition of the property, you may then be able to apply for a mortgage. In some circumstances, you may be able to go down the route of arranging it in advance and having the bridge loan switch to a mortgage, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're planning on purchasing a property at auction without mortgage finance, you should start to put your plans in place when the auction catalog has been released. So what I always encourage everybody or anybody who's willing and planning to buy from an auction is always go to any auction portals or websites, find out when their catalogs are coming out, request if they could email you some brochures. Now they're doing quite a lot of e-brochures to cut out costs, so you can get those e-brochures and just have a little mush around and see what properties you fancy and whatever attracts your fancy, and then from there you can typically maybe start expressing an interest or arranging to go and view them. So this typically takes about 4 weeks before any auction happens. Buying land. As we spoke from the last time, there were questions from other people as well that did ask questions that, look, how do we buy land? How do we do land banking? What is land banking? We've heard about land banking. Are there any advantages of buying land? And buying land or land typically is something that never loses value. It's something that gains value. And what I always say to people is that as long as all of us are still within this island, this country will not be building a mile of land into the sea. So wherever there's land available, and there's different types of lands, green belt land and brown land. So what are those? So we'll talk about this today, and just seek some clarification as to what can you buy? Can you buy a green belt land? Can you buy brown land? And what's advisable? So buying land can be far more appealing than buying bricks and mortar for others. So the interesting thing about purchasing land is that you feel as if you are acquiring your very own share, however small, of planet Earth. That's how I look at it at least. So however, there are a few pitfalls purchasing land, and generally simpler than purchasing property. It can also potentially be as lucrative. So 10 tips. So what we've done, we've put together some top 10 tips to help you consider when you're looking to buy land, or when you're looking to lock any monetary value on land to see it accruing. And what I always advise people is that when you buy any form of investment, it's never with the view of immediate gain, but it's always for long-term benefits. So be clear about what you are buying. So understand what you're buying, be it green land or brown land. But essentially, as we all know, the laws of this country, it is very difficult to get any form of planning when it comes to maybe perhaps consideration of building on greenbelt land. So brown land tends to be a lot better. You are in a position or favorable position to get planning permission to either build structures or put just planning plans. And usually what I always say to everybody is that when you buy a pocket of land, if you get planning, so I'll give you just a typical example. If you bought a piece of land for about 10,000, for about 20,000 or 25,000, when you get planning application granted on that piece of land, you almost double the value of that piece of land. That's something for you to think about. So perhaps you see land as a better investment than other assets. Perhaps you want a site to build your own home, because some people may want to have their own land to build their own home. Or perhaps you want to become a smallholder. You certainly need to have a long-term plan for the plot, because it will determine what and where to buy. Okay, so familiarize yourself with the different types of land in the market. So we've got countryside, semi-rural, urban lands. So those are things that we need to be aware of. So greenfield land, which has never been developed, if different in character, is different from character, beg your pardon, from brown land, which has been built over previously. So they are distinct markets, and in some respects, subject to different planning requirements. So spend time researching on the market, and there are various places where you can search. So there are land auctioneers. There are various property portals where you can also find land. You could have neighbors as well. That could be you could be neighboring. That could have some pockets of land where you are, and they could be willing to sell them. So always check out restrictive covenants on pieces of land. So we'll talk about restrictive covenants in a moment. So there is a large variation of land values. So this is an example I've given here. So being achieved at the present time, so ranging from £5,000 to £15,000 per acre, depending on location and the quality of land. So you need to develop a feel for the market and for what is reasonable, to pay for your piece of land. So shop around. It's important to shop around. So there is usually plenty of land to offer at any time, although not all of it is publicly advertised. So to start your search, visit the auction websites and various portals. There are specialist land agents dotted around the country. And again, if you need more information, by all means, drop Lisedi an email and she'll be able to share some information with you. So land auctions are another option if you are prepared to move quickly, but you should also be alert to other potential sources of land, e.g. homeowners happy to sell a patch of land at the edge of their property, as I've mentioned before. So also focus on the growth potential. Now, the location mantra applies in land. So as much as properties, keep an eye out for areas due to benefit from improved infrastructure, such as transport links. Remember that price is greatly affected by location. So if you are not personally acquainted with the area of your search, always spend time getting to know to know it, to see if it really does meet your criteria. Okay, number 6, another tip top number 6, so it's establish whether you will need planning permission for any building on land. So this is how you get to do this, is usually having to do what we call a pre-planning application. Usually you get a response within 7 or 14 days, and that will tell you whether you can be able to get any form of planning before you commit yourself. Some plots of land are sold with planning permission already granted, and these tend to be expensive. So you can add value to any piece of land if you buy it without planning and have planning permission granted on that one. Also, although this is often only outline planning permission, you will need to clear the final details with the planning authorities. So be wary of restrictive covenants or other legal restrictions on your freedom of maneuver. In short, planning issues are so intimately linked to your decision to purchase any land that it is vital to appoint a solicitor to expertise in this particular area. Be sure to get the land properly surveyed. An empty field may not look as if it needs to be given once over by a chartered surveyor. But there are potential hidden snags with land purchases, from boundaries, the rights of ways, flood risks, and overhead power lines. So it's always important to do your surveys, check, and get somebody who's in the know to check any land for you before you commit yourself. So it's always best to be on the safe side and to seek professional advice. So always double check with your plot of land where it begins and where it ends. It's always very important that we do that. So access to land can sometimes be more problematic than it appears. And you may find that if you buy a piece of land with difficulties in access, it may very, very hamper you as well in getting planning permission. So you need to be wary of the land which is separated from public highway by so-called ransom strip, a small parcel of land retained by previous owners with the intention of restricting development unless the ransom is paid. So this again is always clarified in any restrictive covenant. So always treat the purchase of land as a long-term investment. You are not likely to make a quick profit on a field in the present climate. So it is sensible to play the long game and try to judge the optimum time to develop that piece of land or sell it. Final one, identify the right agents who can help you search the process. So a good agent will want to have an understanding of your circumstances and needs, and every property or plot or land you see on the market is being marketed by a full service. Always ensure that it's marketed by a full service estate agent or letting agent, so you will always have to deal with them face to face, and so that they can give you some very valuable advice. Again, like I said, contact details. My name is Marven Gabula, but should you want any questions after this or emails, by all means, email Lisa Dimube and she'll be able to help you on Lisa@Rodor Housing and Support.co.uk, or call 0121 377 7377 and select option 2 and ask for Lisa. And I trust this presentation has been helpful. Any questions? I think that will be the time for questions, Pastor.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Good overview. I appreciate that. So yeah, now is the time for questions. And I would say to those of you who are on the call, you can do this one of two ways. You can either raise your hand if you know how to do that, and I will pick those whose hand has been raised, or you can unmute yourself. Or you can send them to me on the chat box, and I will ask Marvin the questions. So either you can send them to me on the chat, I'll ask them, or raise your hand and then you're gonna unmute yourself and ask them. So the first question has come in, and that is, what is outline planning permission? For those that may not be familiar with the term, what's outline planning permission?
I think the outline planning permission is what you can get in principle, what they are willing to offer in terms of planning permission. It's not anything complicated. It is part and parcel of our planning permission, but it's just basically an outline of what they are prepared to grant as planning.
Okay. Okay, all right, guys, any other questions that have come up? Now's your time to ask. Is there a cost to applying for planning permission?
Yes, usually there are costs for applying for planning permission, whether be it, because there's various types of planning permissions that one can apply for. It could be a change of use planning. So when I mention a change of use planning, so you could buy a property that previously maybe could have been used as a commercial building, and you would like to, or maybe perhaps express an interest to convert that into a residential building. So that's from an A, whatever A category class it may be considered or fall under within the commercial planning side, to a residential. Usually with the residential, we talk them, they fall under the categories of C3, C3, and then if you want to turn them into maybe various types of levels of maybe perhaps of uses, you can take it to a C4, which tends to be residential still, but of a special category. So if it's a change of use planning, then again, there's a cost. On average here in Birmingham, for anything that pertains to about applying for change of use planning, you are talking in anything between 495 to 595 pounds per application, depending on the size. So you have to send them the plans and your proposal of what planning application you're looking for. And if you're using a surveyor to do that, or an architect to do that for you, you are also looking in excess of around about 990 pounds for an architect to submit your planning application.
Okay. Okay, so maybe like 1.5 to 2 grand at least.
Ideally. So again, it depends on the size of the property that you're also trying to convert. I'll give you a good example here, Pastor. So sometime last year, we tried to check out with some surveyors as to getting some plans drawn by an architect, and also being submitted for a big massive development of about 28 apartments with a mix of 21 one-bed self-contained and seven 2-bed self-contained apartments. Just to get the plans drawn was at a cost of £12,500 on their own, just to get the plans drawn. This is before even submitting. So if you're submitting anything of that scale, the costs then again quadruple, or they're 5 times more, because it's a bigger scale. And again, it does take a bit of time for the plans to go through. But if it's for anything small, usually tends to range about anything residential nature or commercial being changed into residential, you are looking at anything between 495 to 525 mark.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next question is, what's the smallest amount of money you can reasonably start with to think about buying some land?
Again, if we go back to the top tips, 10 top tips we shared, it's all entirely up to you. So usually, like what I gave as an example is that an acre, just an acre on its own, will cost you or dent your pocket with about £5,000. In some areas, depending on the postcode, semi-rural, you may buy them for almost £15,000 an acre. So if you're looking for a 2-acre piece of land in an expensive postcode, you are looking at around about £30,000 mark. If you're looking at maybe perhaps a reasonable area postcode, you may be looking at 10,000. But if you're buying it from an auction, always remember that there is a lot of pointers and a lot of people going there to bid, and that tends to inflate prices because there's a lot of people bidding, and it tends to put or add the value of land and push it even steeper. So anything between 5 to 15,000 an acre depending. So it's always easy to check it online. So if you go online and just type how much an acreage piece of land would cost in an area you are interested in, you can get a kind of a feel or an idea of how much it will cost you. So really, in terms of having the amount or a specific amount of money, it all depends on your budget and what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you. What's a good agent to help you in your search? What are the characteristics? Assuming that means, yeah, okay.
Well, again, usually agents, you can call them in, but I suppose you're looking for an organization that has experience, or an individual who's got experience and who's been doing that kind of business for a long time. And again, you can check their accreditations again online, and check what people's reviews are. And again, by simple talking, a good agent will always want to seek to find out what your interests are. A good agent will always seek to find out what your total amount of spend or reasonable spend would be. And they would also as well be quite quick at recommending maybe genuine things to you, as opposed to clinching a quick sell and for them turning it into a commission for themselves. So really, a good agent would be one who's accredited, one who has a good reputation, one who also express an interest in finding out and understanding what your needs are. It's always important, because it has to be your needs, what you're looking for at that specific time, as opposed to making a quick sell.
Okay. You mentioned that there are public portals with properties listings, auctions. Are there any private ones? If so, I mean, is that a benefit if there's a private one as opposed to a public one? And if there are private ones, are there membership fees?
Not really. You don't incur any membership fees to any auctions. What you would incur are just the purchase fees. So you've got the auctioneer's listing fee. You will be able to purchase that. So if we go back just slightly, when we were talking about purchasing properties from an auction, you may find that in a legal pack, anybody who's selling a property may actually put it within the legal pack, and as part of the contract, that whoever wins the bids would be, one, paying for their listing, two, also paying their cost of their auctions fees, and also paying the deposit on top. So it's always important that you check out those little small prints, which we call small prints, but there are no specific costs. You don't pay any cost to join any auctions. In terms of public auctions, when we say public auctions, I mean, the ones I know, there are different types of auctions again. You do have land auction companies, you do have property auction companies, and they do also sell a mix. So those tend to be privately owned companies. And now usually the public owned auctioneers, they've closed, unless if it's anything that's being sold by probate. And if probate has to be selling that, then they tend to push some stuff over to private auctioneers and stuff like that. So I really wouldn't be worried about that. But there's so many auction portals. Even some estate agents now have turned their own platforms into auction floors, just to maximize on commissions and turn around and maybe perhaps offer services to the general public. But really, just to check, private auctions are the best. Public ones tend to be government owned, but they don't tend to do that anymore, because it tends to for the government, usually what you find is that for any local authorities or government, there is an issue of conflict of interest. So they tend to push it to private companies to do them for them.
Okay, thank you. What's the best way to find auctions? And is there a way to shadow anyone?
What's the best way to find auctions? I hope I'm understanding your question very well. Again, it's about checking through available auction floors or auction companies. But again, the best thing that I've always, I mean, what I did for myself when I started going into auctions, I think I visited about 3, 4, if not 5. So what that did for me was it helped me understand on how the bidding processes worked. So you have those that bid through proxy. So one doesn't necessarily need to be around or there at the auction when a bid is done, but you've got somebody who's doing that for you on your behalf. So that's bidding through proxy. There are those that bid through online. So online bidding, you can register, and actually instead of going there physically, as long as you know the maximum spend you have, once you win a bid in an auction online, again, you're taken through the same paces like anybody who would have attended the auction at that particular time.
Are there any auction company houses that you recommend?
I mean, the top 3 ones we have here in the Midlands and East Midlands at the moment, they are SDL Big Woods. You've got Bond Wolf, which is also another big one which has come up in the scene now. You've also got Cotton's Auctions. I've seen other small estate agents open up, like for example, I think Green & Co here in Southern Coalfield in Birmingham. They've got their auction floors, and there's various little ones dotted left, right, and center. But what I always encourage anybody who wants to buy from an auction, buy from a reputable auction company, because then at least if there is anything that doesn't go accordingly, you are being looked after with the right hands.
Okay, I mean, those are the questions that have come in so far. I'm not sure if those are online, if there's any other questions that you have.
Maybe just to go back again, Pastor, that I did mention about getting mortgages for auction properties. It's very possible to get mortgages when you're buying, or you can get it as long as you've got a mortgage agreement in principle. You can buy a property from an auction. But the beautiful thing as well with auctions, you also have the opportunity to view the property before you go and bid for the auction. So what auction companies tend to do, they tend to publish viewing dates, so where people can actually go and view the properties before they go or go on sale. So what I always encourage anybody who wants or considers to buy a property from an auction is go with someone who is in the know regarding property if it's your first time, just to avoid situations whereby you may bid and win a bid on a property that may be costly then. And I've had those kind of experiences before, where I've even bid for properties that I haven't even viewed, because sometimes I'm daring like that. But I've learned from my mistakes in the past, where I've bought a property and the property has come without any heating, and I've had to expend money or buying and installing heating systems. Just on average, just to install a heating system from scratch in a property, you're looking at anything between £4,500 to £5,500 just to put a boiler in radiators. And if the property does not have any of those things, so it tends to be really, really costly. And if you're looking to have it as a home or to let it, you can't get any form of lending if the property is not in a good repairable state. So if the property doesn't have any running water, or it doesn't have any kitchen or bathroom, until those things are in place, it may be difficult for you to get some form of mortgage. But if it's just a bridge loan just to be able to purchase it, then yes, it is possible. So, but it's always important to be fully aware of what time or completion timescales are in an auction, as opposed to buying maybe a property from an estate agent where really the completion is upon exchange of contracts. In an auction, once the gavel falls, you exchange contracts. So then you have the ability to complete, or you've got the liability to complete within a specific time, whether conditional or unconditional.
Okay. Okay, well, any last questions of any of our viewers? Oh, there's one that's come in. Is it worth to do property? Is it worth doing a property deal sourcing with a co-sourcer when I'm starting out or not?
Again, I think that's depends on one's choice, to be fair. It's all entirely depending on what you are interested in. If they're giving you value, or they're adding value to whatever purchase you're making, then it's absolutely fine. But it's always important that, at least if you are starting out, or if you're beginning to buy, if you're a beginner into investing in property, always just walk out with somebody that can hold your hand and show you how things are. And as like we've said in the past, Pastor Ramdin, we are quite happy to provide anybody with any form of support, whoever is willing to be mentored and be supported. And I think this program has been absolutely very, very good, because I think we've had probably around about 10, if not 15 young people, and people who have actually been logging into these programs, who've actually contacted us, and some of them we've actually had some good mentoring sessions, and we're not charging anybody any pennies, free of charge. It's available for anybody to gain that form of knowledge. So it depends on what you want. If you feel that it adds value for you to have a co-sourcer, by all means. And if it is that you always be very keen on looking at what's in it for them. But the most important is about what's in it for you and what you're looking for.
Mm. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you as well for being open to mentoring people. I think that's a very, very commendable, and it's great that you can share that knowledge and skills you have with other people.
Absolutely. And again, I think the most important thing that we need to share with all our viewers and our participants, young people, youth, whoever they are, is understanding that the best thing that one can do for themselves is either owning land. And again, I think from the previous presentation that we did with Craig, we did actually share a couple of quotes from what Sister White encourages us to do, to be owners of land and owners of property. And the view also as well is that, in our passing from this side of heaven, we can leave these things to the church, and these things add value to the church, and it still continues to enable God's mission and ministry to carry on forward. And I'm sure we can pick up as many Patricks as we've had in the past who have been able to leave their own previous resources and riches to the church, and that has taken the church forward. And that should be our view, that how do we look forward to gaining for God as opposed to just personal gain. But we share these pieces of information because God wants us to be the heads as opposed to the tails. So why should we make other people rich in properties when actually God has given us the knowledge and the acumen? That if you can imagine, if all of us as Adventists, we were endowed with the ability to own our own assets, imagine what that would do for God's mission and the church. It would take us to another level.
Mm. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Our church has been benefited numerous times over the past in different parts of the world by people who have, been blessed and used their resources shrewdly and been able to invest in something more than just themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us on all the previous occasions and tonight as well. So just once again, thank you very much. And if you could just go back to the previous screen, just in case anyone missed it, if anyone wants to get in touch with you. There we go. If anyone wants to get in touch, these are the contact details to go through if you want any further information with Marvin. Well, let's close with a word of prayer, and thank you for your time.
Cheers.
Father in heaven, we thank you for the privilege we've had to spend this time together. Thank you for all the information that's been shared. And I pray, Lord, for those who've been listening. And Lord, may you give us wisdom and guidance in how we can best use the resources we have and how we can apply ourselves to the information we've learned today. I pray, Lord, that you would continue to bless Marvin in his family life and in his business and in his ministry. And we thank you and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.